Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
Someone who just loves adventure and is keen to see like the world in a different way as well. So like people's experience and their motivation like really differs. Like some people will take part because they want to race and they want to win. Some people want to take part because they want to see how far they can push themselves to find out what they're truly capable of and where their limits lie. And other people know that they won't be able to make the time cuts, but they want to do this for themselves, for their own personal reasons.
Well, you know, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
I need you, brother. Please, Sensei, please.
Courage, Bob.
Courage.
That's it. Courage. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Hey, thank you, Sensei. Thank you, Sensei. Thank you.
Say the word, Chef.
Let it rip.
The Dark Zone is so excited for the return of one of the original Adventure Addicts races. That's right, folks. Break the Habit is back in 2026 and heading to the mountains of beautiful West Virginia. On May 30th and 31st, teams will take on to 24 to 30 hours of trekking, pack rafting, mountain biking, and elite navigation in Pocahontas County, one of the most rugged and adventurous regions in the whole state. We're talking about the heart of the Monongahela National Forest, 5 state parks, 2 state forests, 400 miles of trails, legendary mountain biking, and free-flowing rivers. It's a true playground for adventure racing. Like all Adventure Addicts events, Break the Habit is designed to let teams create their own adventure. You'll choose routes that match your ability, but make no mistake, smart strategy and top-notch navigation will determine who conquers the full course. And yes, it is both a USARA and AR World Championship qualifier. If you're looking for big terrain, real navigation, and that classic Adventure Addict spirit, Break the Habit should be on your calendar. You can find the link in the show notes or at adventureaddictsracing.com. That's right, folks. One word, adventureaddictsracing.com. Good luck, and we'll see you in West Virginia. Adventure racing creates moments that can't be staged, bought, or stumbled into. They have to be earned. And photographer Nick Winia is there to capture them. A documentary filmmaker whose work has appeared in Vice, The Wall Street Journal, and publications around the world. Nick has been capturing adventure racing since 2022. Shooting the Endless Mountains Adventure Race, Broad Run off-road events, and New York Adventure Racing Association events. He doesn't just take photographs. He tells the story of your race. If you're a race director who wants images that do justice to your race and your athletes, check out his adventure race gallery at storycityfilms.com. One word, storycityfilms.com. Look under projects, click on adventure racing for a full gallery. Nick Winia, bringing the storyteller's eye to the world's greatest sport. Welcome to the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. Episode 153. 153. We are chugging along here at Dark Zone World Headquarters. 2026 going into a brand new race season here in the Northern Hemisphere. We like to look at adventure and endurance sports across a wide spectrum, and today's episode is really all about that. You know, if you spent any time adventure racing, you know that feeling of the dot watching, the self-sufficiency, the volunteers, the drive to cover ground that most people have a hard time imagining. Well, today's guest lives in that same world, but just on 2 wheels. David Ayre is with Lost Dot, the organization behind some of the world's most demanding ultra cycling events. We're talking self-supported racing here across multiple countries, a community built on the same ethos that we live by in adventure racing, and racers that send riders across entire continents on routes they designed themselves. Sounds kind of familiar, right, folks? We're delighted that you are here. Enjoy David. He did a great job at the interview, and I look forward to you learning more about him and the races that Lost Dot puts on. Remember, folks, you keep racing, we'll keep talking. As regular listeners of the podcast know, what we like to do as often as possible is we have a lot of adventure racing content. People come on from the community and the racers and the race directors and the volunteers. And from time to time, we like to go out of the community. We like to bring people on to spend some time talking to us about sports and activities that I like to say are adventure race adjacent. Not pure adventure racing, but rather have adventure built into them, hard baked into the culture, because we can learn from them and they can learn from us. So I'm happy today to bring on David Ayre. David Ayre is with Lost Races. I'll let him explain what that means and what that is. I learned about him through my following of the Transcontinental Race, which is a famous ultra cycling adventure race. And I will let him clarify my words as he has to. But we're delighted to have David on the show today. So David, welcome to the Dark Zone. Thanks for the leap of faith. Thanks for coming on the show. Before we get started into the details, big picture for our adventure race community, what is Lost and what kind of races do you put on?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. So Lost is an organization that runs 4 different ultra cycling events across Europe. So the one that we are best known for, the one that's most well established and has been running for the longest, is the Transcontinental Race. So the first edition of that took place back in 2013. It was founded by Mike Hall, and it was inspired by something he had done the year before called the World Cycle Race, where he had circumnavigated the globe in a little over 90 days, but also realized that not everyone would have that kind of time, money available to them, and wanted a more accessible adventure that people could take part in. And so the Transcontinental was born, initially racing from London to Istanbul. And over the years, the route has changed every year. Different things have been introduced, like the introduction of control points, the order you have to attend those in, focuses on the environment, on the number of women who are participating. So we've been evolving that over time. Then we also have the Trans-Pyrenees, which is a double traverse of the Pyrenees mountain range that sits between France and Spain. So we recently ran our 5th edition of that as well. A slight COVID hiatus in there, meaning that the first edition took place in 2019, then we only came back in 2022. But that one is largely road-based, with some incentivized off-road for people to try and gain a bit of a racing advantage across that beautiful mountain range. Then the Accursed is a 1,600-kilometer mountain biking race around the Balkans, starting and finishing in Albania, but also going through Montenegro, Bosnia, and Kosovo. That is not for the faint-hearted. That is definitely a race where you will be taken to remote areas and be treated with some really, really beautiful remote scenery. And then the newest offering that we have, which we'll host the inaugural event of next May, is the Lost 101. So that is the continuation of a campaign that we had on the Transcontinental this year, which was called 100 Women, 100 TCR Women. And this is really trying to create a race which is specifically for women, trans and non-binary riders. We thought we might have around 100 people on the start line. We're pleased that we're going to have many more than that. So it looks like this event has really captured people's imagination. And we're excited to see where that goes as well.
Oh, 4 big races. It's funny, you probably have the experience that when you talk about these races at a cocktail party or at a local pub with your friends, people look at you and their eyes get wide open. They go, oh my goodness, that's so hard. That feels so impossible. As we talked about before we came onto the call, adventure races go as long as 10 days, right? And so we are 2 separate sports, live in the stratosphere of really hard activity, really difficult challenges. Let me ask you a few logistical questions that I know our community is really curious about. So you mentioned, for example, how the TCR, is that a set route or does the route change every single year?
So the route changes every year and it has small portions which are fixed, but then your route between them is your own. So we have bits of parkour, which can be maybe just a few kilometers if we want people to go on just a small stretch, or anything up to 150, 160 kilometers as well. And then there will be control points where the riders have to validate their progress along the way as well. So they'll get given a brevet card when they register for the event, and then that gets stamped along the way. So you have a physical record of your race. What that means is that there is a natural shape to the race, but you see people making some really different and interesting choices between those fixed points. So some people might take a really long flat route because that suits their strengths, whereas others might take a much shorter but much more mountainous route between 2 points as well, because they're a really strong climber and they're confident in that terrain. And so you see when the race starts and when it's on the tracking map that's live on the internet, you see this incredible kind of mixture of dots going in every different direction, and it's really hard to make sense of it if you're new to it. But then you realize that within that kind of chaos, there's something really interesting unfolding as well. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the race.
We both sports share dot watching, right? Because in the races too, our teams carry GPS, right? They carry trackers, and we follow the dots, right? And so I'm laughing at the word dot is transferred between the two sports. The questions that I ask you, you mentioned there are 4 races there. I'm assuming that those, your own, the parkours, your own mapping, all that's across all 4 of those races, right? That's a common theme that it's a general route, things like that. Or do any of the 4 races have differences?
So there's one exception to that. So the TCR, the Trans-Pyrenees, and the Lost Dot 101 are all a mixture of free route with fixed controls along the way, whereas the Accursed, the mountain biking race, is a fixed route. So all of that 1,600 kilometers is there, ready and waiting for our riders. It was designed over multiple years by our team, spending time out there. And we're currently in the process of refreshing that as well, so that we'll have 2 routes that we can alternate. So next year, the Accursed won't be running, but it'll be coming back in 2027 for the new and hopefully improved route as well.
Guys, so 3 races, free route, you make your own choice. More or less, there's a general route that everyone follows with different choices people are making. Accursed is a dedicated 1,600 kilometer route we have there. Very often adventure racing has a language that is, we talk about things like TAs and CPs, and people look at us like what we're talking about here. Just for definition's sake, for those who are brand new, what is parkour?
So a parkour is a bit of fixed route. So you have 2 different types of control. You have the control point where you get your brevet card stamped. And then you also have these small sections of parkour. So it's a term that's taken from early days of the Tour de France, where they would set smaller portions of route specifically because they wanted to keep riders, to know that riders had been through those points as well.
Gotcha. You have to cover that you have to go that direction.
Yes. Yeah.
And then a brevet card, I'm assuming, is kind of like our passport. It's something you carry with you when you get to do you call them what do you call them? Transition areas? You call them check-ins?
Control points.
Control points. So when you get to a control point, there's a volunteer there who will stamp that, and that's the proof that you were there, and you have to bring that to the very end.
Yes. Yeah. This is what the beautiful bits of the whole kind of like the community around the race as well, is that all of these control points that are all along the race, across all of our races, are staffed by people who give up their time to be there, to be a part of the race and to bring life and make it happen. And so they're the ones who have the stamps and are making sure that all of the kind of arrivals are properly recorded. And then we have a really accurate view of the race results overall as well.
Yeah, we have the exact same thing in our sport, adventure racing. The volunteers they are the engine behind the races. Without the volunteers, there are no races. And so we talk a lot about that, how grateful we are what the volunteers do. And the same thing exists for the TCR and the other races that you have there. Now, I know that Mike passed away in Australia in 2017, but the TCR was his idea, was his race, and all this is carried on in honor of him. Talk to us a bit about him.
I was never fortunate enough to meet Mike myself. And in fact, the team at Lost Dot now, Anna aside, who was Mike's partner, none of us met him personally, but what we do is try to be custodians, really, of this beautiful thing that he built. So he was something of like, in the early days of like endurance cycling and adventure racing for bikepacking purposes, he was something of a legend. So he won multiple editions of the Tour Divide, a really famous mountain biking route from Canada down to the New Mexico border, and won the Trans Am race that runs from west to east across America, road race as well. And he had won multiple 12 and 24-hour mountain biking races in the UK and in Europe as well. And he really, from a mixture of those experiences, plus that world cycle race that I mentioned earlier, where he won and set the record, he created the TCR, and that has given birth to this amazing whole community and set of races that are now in existence. So that was the first one that really laid the groundwork in Europe. Those things already existed in America with things like the Tour Divide, but that was him bringing a taste of that to Europe. And what's amazing is that he might not be here now, but his legacy is enormous. So you have a succession of people who have taken part in the Transcontinental, the Trans-Pyrenees, etc., who have gone on to set up their own races. So people like Nelson Trees, who has gone on to set up the Atlas Mountain Race and the Silk Road Mountain Race and the Hellenic and Taurus, which is coming next year, which looks really beautiful as well. Or you have Angela Walker, who went on to set up All Points North, 1,000-kilometre distance event in the north of England, or Pico Pawlowski, who now runs the Race Through Poland, which has had multiple editions and is a really beautiful race, and one which a lot of riders who go on to do TCR also take part in because it's a great test and follows a similar format. And I think to see all of that is really special and is testament to Mike and his kind of vision for what this sport was and could become as well.
Yeah, I remember Mike Hall's passing. I remember reading about it. I remember knowing about him and the different documentaries that are out there. And for the listener, I will add some info about Mike, some links in the show notes to follow some of the work that he did there. And I think that you're spot on about that, right? He loved his bicycle. He loved the ultra cycling scene. He loved going big, long distances. And his passing was tragic, and it was so upsetting to the community. But to your point, people recognized who he was and what he loved to do, and they picked up the mantle. They carried it forward. Alongside that, another thing that the ultra cycling community and adventure racing share is that very often racers will go home, will look around their home areas and like, you know something, I could put on a race here. And that's where all those big races have come from. So credit to Mike and TCR for sort of giving birth to all these other racing scenes, because, and you probably know this much better than me. Can you talk about the growth of events like TCR? You just ticked off like 4 different race directors and like 7 different races. You've seen this growth happening over the last several years. Talk a bit about that. And on top of that, if people wanted to learn about these races, where would they go learn about them?
Yeah, I think the growth in ultracycling events, both like road, gravel, mountain biking, mixed terrain, has really kind of taken off. Especially in like the last 5 years, there's almost been an explosion of the number of races that are now available. The choice that is out there for people who are maybe ultra curious or even like through to kind of seasoned ultra distance racers is really great. And I think that's a fantastic thing. I think as well, there's like the community is very broad and those races are very different. So, I mean, the TCR is known for its 10 simple rules, for instance, which we follow, and that gives a lot of kind of clarity and structure to the race. Others are more informal. Others have smaller sets of rules, or perhaps like ones which are inspired by us but have been adapted for their own races as well. So whatever it is that you're looking for or you're interested in dipping your toe into, there is something out there. And I think that's really nice. So for instance, I mean, like when I've taken part in other races myself, so took part in a race called Be Hard in Bosnia. I absolutely love Bosnia. It's one of my favorite countries, really, really beautiful. And getting to know the organizer of that event, he spoke about like how he had followed the TCR and that inspired him to set up a race in his own country to show people the best of Bosnia. Similarly, Badlands, which is an 800-kilometer gravel event in southern Spain, really beautiful. Yeah, that was a race I took on as a pair with my friend John, who also works on the Lost Dot races as well. And we rode that in August of this year, and that is an absolutely stunning race. But David, the organizer of Badlands as well, speaks about how much Mike and the TCR inspired him in the beginning of like his journey into organizing ultra distance races as well. I would 100% recommend anyone who is interested in like gravel racing to go and take part in that. It is one of the best routes I've ever ridden anywhere. So yeah, we share a love and an enthusiasm for that race for sure.
Routing. Racers could use their own GPS. They could use anything that they want for the purpose of routing.
Yes. So we partner with Ride with GPS. So they are like a route planning platform. Mm-hmm. And we give all of the people who sign up to our races a membership to that for a number of months, so they can use that as a tool. There are other tools out there. So there's things like Komoot or Strava, etc., that people will use. Some people will still go back to like the old OS maps and look at it like a hard copy of stuff as well to figure it out, and then move to having something more electronic as well. But the route planning is each individual rider's responsibility. This is part of the challenge, but ultimately a big part of the fun of participating in these sorts of events. So it means that you have to do really deep research into the road networks and where it's possible to ride a bike, where it might be impossible to, either because it's a road that's banned for cyclists or it's a road that Lost.org have banned as well, because we ban a selection of roads on safety grounds based on our own experiences as well from being out in these different places. So it's a really in-depth, detailed exercise. And it means, it means that you can optimize it to suit your strengths as well, which is a really nice thing. One story I often think back to with this is that for TCR number 8, there was an area in Romania called Transalpina, which was where the control point in a bit of parkour was. And it was a really little known area. And my colleague Andrew, who was due to join the Lost.org team after his own participation in TCR back in 2022, had done the race through Poland earlier in the year, run by a TCR alumni as well. And he spoke about how someone there knew something about this, and that a kind of crowd of riders who were all preparing for TCR gathered round and were all hear about this track that runs through the mountains in Romania, and all the gathering of that intelligence and the insight and understanding of what your race is really going to be like, I think is such a huge part of the fun. And a really, really nice feature of the race overall.
The version of that adventure racing is this, because on the other hand, in adventure racing, the course, the maps are held secret until the race begins. You know more or less the general area. Like, for example, this past year, World Championships was in Penticton, British Columbia. Penticton was the finish line. So people knew that that was the host city and the finish line. So people knew they were racing back to Penticton, but the race was over a week long. And so therefore people spent a lot of time analyzing. It could be here, it could be there. So we have somewhat of a similar dynamic where, while we don't know the course, adventure racers love analyzing. And they're like, well, if there's 10 stages and if there's 3 trekking and if there's X amount of kayaking, and they start figuring it out. But there's that pre-race excitement that people have. You mentioned that there are people who spend a lot of time analyzing, looking at the course, looking for routes. Are there racers that just show up on the start line and turn the GPS on for the first time? And I'll just figure it out along the way?
I wouldn't go so far as that. So but there are definitely people who are more kind of open to what the road decides for them, should we say. So I suppose a couple of examples, and these are both, in fairness, experienced and strong riders who've done this. But one is Justinas Leveka.
Yeah.
So Justinas won the Accursed earlier this year. He's done the Triple Crown in the US, so the AZT, Colorado, and Tour Divide as well. He's taken part in those. He's really lovely guy, very, very, very strong, but also by his own admission, doesn't love spending loads of time planning his routes. Likes to, I suppose, rely a little bit on his strength and a little bit on his instincts and his experience. And it's interesting in that the lack of planning that he did around that for the Accursed, in terms of where he might resupply and things like that, didn't trip him up, and he won and set a new kind of FKT around the route as well. Whereas when he took on TCR this summer, he found it a little bit more difficult because you're traversing an entire continent, and the scope for potential misadventures within that is higher. So he ended up taking a route between 2 of the control points that was disadvantageous for him, I suppose. Another one is a rider that some of the American audience might be familiar with, Chaz Christensen, who has taken part in a few editions of TCR as well. And on TCR number 10, towards the end, he'd maybe covered about 2/3, 3/4 of the race. And he was getting a little bit frustrated with the route that he'd plotted before he'd started, and instead started to look at the route that the leaders who were ahead of him were then taking, and then trying to follow the way that they'd gone as well. So adapting his kind of race strategy when he was out on the road. That is the sort of choice that you only make if you are really confident in how self-sufficient you are in ability to ride mixed terrains, because you don't, at that point, you haven't done all your research, so you've no idea what's coming. tapered it off and still finished really strongly as well. So yeah, you do get the kind of the extreme end of that, but most people are more in the kind of diligent planning side of stuff, like pouring street view, looking at all the different trail views on different mapping apps, all of that sort of stuff.
I'm sure Strava heat map is a very popular planning tool, right?
Oh, very much. Yeah, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. What we're finding here in America, you probably see it too. A lot of our friends buy houses based on the Strava heat map. That when they're going to go live somewhere, they want to make certain that they have access to like routes and trails, and they won't buy a house where there's no heat map there. So little plug there for Strava. What is the time window? Like take TCR, pick any one of the 4 races as you want. How long do they have to cover? I know there's cutoffs, right? On during the race, they have to make it to the control point by certain times. What is the range, if you will, of the first finisher to the last finisher?
So what I might do is give a contrast of 2. So if we talk about the Trans-Pyrenees and the Transcontinental. So Transcontinental is obviously the longest. It's traditionally been around 4,200 kilometers. This year and next year, it's closer to 5,000. So it's like the route is stretched out slightly.
So for those who only speak American, that's roughly 3,000 miles. Am my math right about that?
3,200 miles, yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying it out loud because the people at home are probably staring at their podcast player right now that we're talking about a race that is over 3,000 miles long.
Yeah. And the winner of TCR could do that in 11 days. But the time cutoff is for this year's event was 18 days.
That feels a little tight.
Yeah. But that's to finish in. So this is an important distinction as well. So general classification is something that we have for our races. So if you visit all of the controls, complete all of the parkour, and finish within the time cut, you're eligible for a general classification finish, which is like the kind of gold standard. If you miss a time cut or like miss a section of parkour and don't correct that, you're still eligible for a finish overall. So people will continue to ride for a race finish long past the point where the time cutoff is. So you'll have people coming in like in the 20 to 30 day, quite a bit. Our Lanterne Rouge for the TCR, so the last rider out on the road this year, came in at just over 50 days.
50.
So, yeah. So they, and that is another American rider as well, Helen Weatherall, her name is, and what's really beautiful about those moments as well is like the amount that the dot watchers at home will really hone in on riders' progress and like really be encouraging them and supporting them, and wanting them to finish, and then really celebrating that fact when it happens. So for that you've got that, and then for the Trans-Pyrenees it's much shorter, but there's as much climbing, there's as much elevation gain in the Trans-Pyrenees as there is in TCR, which is more than twice as long. So it's one suited to kind of like lightweight climbers essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But that's around 1,900 kilometers, and the winner of that might do it in 5 days. But every day they're doing maybe 8,000 meters of climbing as well. What would that be?
24,000 feet.
Yeah.
More or less. I'm doing quick math in my head. So for the mathematicians at home, don't be too cruel to me on the comments. Recognizing the breadth of the course, the length that's out there. Oh, by the way, adventure racing, kind of similar. If you miss a checkpoint or if you miss a cutoff, you move into the unranked division. You're ranked after everybody who did the complete course. Obviously, the course, you weren't there for 50 days. There's a point in time in which the course is done. The way adventure racing works is, and it's a bit of a different in terms of culture, a race director very often will stay there until every race is accounted for. You know, if someone's doing a 50-day jaunt, obviously you're still close with them, but you're not sitting at the finish line for an additional 39 days.
No. We're not.
No.
We're off doing a recce for the route for the subsequent edition.
In terms of a race of that distance, that breadth, support. Are riders on their own? Can they get support from? Can they organize support from team members? Can they go to shops? Like, how does that work out with the rules?
So our races are completely self-supported. So you are able to access commercially available services. So whether that's a supermarket or a hotel or anything like that. So if you need some food or if you need somewhere to sleep that night, you can book that hotel on the day that you're going to get there, or you can buy that food when you arrive in a town. But what you can't have is someone provide you with a packed lunch, or someone be like buying stuff for you or giving you accommodation or anything.
So you couldn't have a friend or family waiting down the road to hand you a sandwich, like, because they're following your dot. They know where you are, but that's against the rules.
Yes, yeah, and so you have to be totally self-sufficient when you're taking this on. And it's interesting in that increasingly what we see out is dot watchers who will maybe ride out to a point of the routes when they've seen which ways riders are going. Right. And they'll want to cheer them on and like feel like they've seen it and be a part of it. And I think that's really amazing. And I'm interested to see what that does for the development of the sport.
Right.
But in the instances where they're like, oh, I've got this food you're welcome to, I've got this water or whatever, the riders have to say, no, I'm all set, thanks.
Gotcha. But if they stumble across a farmhouse, they can knock on a door and say, can I get a glass of water?
So the way that we describe it is we encourage them to plan better than that, so that they aren't
relying upon some nice old people.
Yeah, but if you're desperate and you happen to come across something like that, then that's okay.
That's okay to go. Okay. Yeah, I remember when Lael Wilcox did her ride around the world, and she was very, very clear that people could ride with her, but she could not draft off anybody. Like they had to be like, there was, because there's that whole self-supported, they have a lot with running FKTs where like even like the presence of a media team moves them from self-supported to supported, right? There's a lot of nuances, a lot of ways to sort of slice that up a little bit. I'm assuming some racers, they pack a bivy bag, some stay in hotels. There's a lot of, I'm assuming there's much like adventure racing, there's a ton of choice in terms of the gear that they could bring.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that's based on experience, comfort levels, how much of a dirt bag you're comfortable being for the course of the race, or that sort of stuff. Most people, even if they intend to sleep out most nights, will still have some nights in hotels, either to charge devices or to wash kit or something like that, or just have like better quality sleep.
Right, just sleep in a bed.
Yeah, but you see a whole spectrum of stuff. And I think that kind of, the difference between supported and supported racing is interesting. And I think like it's, I find it interesting in part because we're starting to see some people from supported backgrounds come to unsupported stuff now as well. So 2-time TCR winner Christoph Strasser won Ram 6 times. So came from a supported racing background, but then came to TCR and has enjoyed phenomenal success there as well. Lael came and raced TCR this summer as well, did really well, did really strongly. Like, yeah. I think
she was third, right? She was third female or third overall?
Yes, third woman. Yeah. So, and I think it's, fascinating. I mean, Lael's background is much broader than supported racing, obviously, but like, Christoph is more from that space. And I think, and the media crew stuff as well is definitely something that we're very conscious of. So we quite tightly control what media production can happen outside of our. So we get quite a lot of requests every year from people who would love to have someone come along and film and like make a story out of their participation in one of our races. Most of those requests we turn down, and it's only ones where we feel like it's really going to add something to the community or tell a story that hadn't been told before, that we allow it. And even then, it's with some fairly strict parameters around only filming at either on the parkour or at control points. So basically at a point where team members are always present so that we can see what's going on and make sure there isn't even an inadvertent like emotional or physical exchange of some.
Worlds had that rule where from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., volunteers and media could not travel out to the course to see a team because that would provide emotional support in the dark of night. So there was a shutdown where media had to stay in a transition area. They could not venture onto the course.
Yeah. That sounds very similar then, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess another thing too, we saw in some races, and I might need to correct for that, is that when a team would be in a transition area, going from say cycling to paddling, whatever it was, they would have friends and family in the area that would be chatting with them inside the transition area. And where that plays a role in adventure racing is that there's very strict rules around knowing where other teams are on the course. Like for you, it really doesn't matter because they have access to their phones and access to GPS. So you know where the leader is compared to you. In adventure racing, we really don't have that. And so very often you would see the unintentional sharing of information, or sometimes intentional sharing of information for advantage. And that's a thing that has to be controlled inside the sport.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so like with people who get in touch and ask if family members can come out and see them, we say the same thing that we do to media teams, which is you can come to a control point and you can see them, because the volunteers and the team will be there, and it's like it keeps it above board.
It's interesting. I've been racing long enough to see the growth in gravel racing, right? And gravel racing is very popular in America. Like anything else, big corporations buy up all the smaller races and they owe it. And the primary tension point for a lot of gravel racers is that now former pro bike racers are now racing gravel, which is fine. But they've also brought support teams, right? So they'll switch bikes out, they'll switch out gear, and it's sort of, gravel always kind of had this ethic around being very grassroots and very fun. And now all of a sudden it's gone up a notch, and people feel it's kind of taken away from the fun of the event.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's definitely a shift a little bit in ultracycling as well, in terms of it feels like we're entering the era of the pro. Slightly.
Starting to mature a little bit. Is there prize money available?
No. So if you win the Transcontinental, your prize is a handshake, and I'll hand you a beer at the finish line.
Right. And we all know that money changes relationships. And so not having prize money, it will turn down getting too professional. But some people, though, they have a certain brand, and winning equals they're making their sponsors happy, the brand happy, things like that. So there's this big mix of all these different dynamics in place, which you have to navigate as a race director.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And we've seen there's like a small but growing number of riders now who are supported in some way by either one or a number of cycling related brands as well, which means that they can dedicate more time to their training or access different types of sport, better kit, better bikes, anything like that. So I think it'll be interesting to see what that does for the ability for, I suppose, like, for want of a better phrase, normal people, right, to compete on a level playing field with them. So the people who hold down a 9-to-5 job and train on the evenings and at weekends and stuff like that, like, will it mean that they can't get as close to the pointy end as they used to be able to?
Right.
So I think that's definitely something I'm conscious of and that we're looking at, but it still feels like it's maybe a little way in the distance.
Yeah, every grassroots sport has a maturation cycle, right? Mm-hmm. Where it starts small and it grows and it gets popular, and it crosses a threshold where it's fundamentally changed and different. What I think protects our two sports, relatively speaking, is the fact that, because it's 3,000 miles of racing, multiple days, everything involved, it keeps it, for lack of a better term, it keeps it kind of pure to the original ethic, right? Of what you kind of found there. And that's the best guard against that. You mentioned when outside media wants to come and cover the race. What we find in adventure racing is that it's a hard sport to cover because of the distance, the time, the people, the personalities. What is your strategy? What is Lost Dot's strategy for bringing the race to the general public? Do you do podcasts, updates? Do you track, or how do you tell the story of the race to the world?
Yeah. So we have dedicated social media channels for each of our races. So across primarily Facebook and Instagram, we will year round share stuff of the races. But when the races are on, you're maybe going to have 10 posts a day documenting what's going on, demonstrating the different landscapes that people are passing through, their experiences, telling stories from the road. And we do that in a number of ways. So we have photographers that are in cars with the race directors who will be out there shooting all over the continent. And then at each of the control points, we have a dedicated control point photographer as well, who is responsible for the parkour that is close by and the control point action as well. So you get some really interesting insights of those moments of interaction with the kind of race. Then we also have a race reporter in the lead car as well with the race director, and they write a daily summary of the race action overall. And then we also have a race podcast, which comes out every day during the race too. So that looks to kind of round out the coverage a little bit and bring more stories from, say, like the mid-pack particularly, but while still giving like a flavour of how the race is unfolding. So you've got a clear sense of where everything fits together, but it means that we have multiple different ways of understanding what's going on with the race, depending on whether you like looking at photos or reading something quite journalistic or listening to a podcast. There's something for everyone. And I think what's quite nice is that we can see as well that riders are looking at the social media even as they're racing.
Well, I've read that they will talk about each other.
Yeah. Especially through the podcast as well. So when our team gets there and interviews them, they might say, "Oh, I heard yesterday on the podcast that they said this, and actually I just wanted to respond to that." And then you get that little funny kind of interactions and conversations from people who might be hundreds of kilometers apart from each other and stuff as well. And that's really nice. And then this year, we introduced for the first time kind of reels as well for stuff as well. So you've got like short form video content as well. Whereas in the past, we've had a feature length film for the Transcontinental and the Trans-Pyrenees as well. The Transcontinental one was on Netflix for a while. The Trans-Pyrenees one is lost on YouTube channel as well.
So what do you find? So obviously, much like adventure racing, you kind of throw a lot of pasta at the wall. You want to see what sticks, right? And you want your fan to find the venue that they enjoy the most, right? Whether it be a daily podcast, whether it be, and that's how I stumbled across you. I listened to the daily podcast, which, by the way, your podcast team is amazing because like the race is weeks long. They're in cars, they're charging the material, they put out these excellent podcasts every single day, and they capture, to their credit, a nice breadth of the race. Not just the pointy end, not just the Lanterne Rouge, but they have these stories they tell along the way. Very, very impressive work by the podcast team, which obviously connected me into bringing you onto the show. What have you found of those different media channels that you have? Do you feel it lands the best with the community, or is it pretty much all over the place?
So, I mean, the photography is still the thing that the races are most known for and interacted with ultimately. So people want to see snippets of the adventure for themselves, in part because they'll be following specific riders and it's really nice to see updates about them, in part because they want to imagine themselves there, and the medium of photography is a great way to do that. So if you have perhaps like a long lens zoomed out photo of a small rider in a big landscape, that could be anyone, it could be you. And that sort of thing helps to inspire people to sign up in future as well, which is really nice. So we definitely still see really high engagement with that, the highest out of the three, really. But the race reports and podcasts are still really well interacted with as well. And the podcast this year saw a huge leap in the number of people who were listening to it, which is really interesting. So across all of our races, we've seen some really strong growth in that as well. So it feels like the kind of the storytelling that we put together in the kind of like daily summary of how that happens, and then getting riders to articulate that in more detail seems to be really resonating with people. So yeah, we're excited to keep working on that and keep trying to make it as engaging as possible and make sure that people get a taste, but not the complete picture of what the race is like. Because the only way you should get the complete picture is to come and take part yourself.
Exactly. So if your ears perk up when you hear this, that's great. But if you really want to do it, find a race and go sign up and get a bike. What do you on that note, on the signing up and the people that listen to it? What is the spectrum of the racer? You mentioned the pointy end of the race before. You mentioned the Lanterne Rouge. You mentioned the 9-to-5 worker. Like, who comes and does these races?
So that's a really big range of folks who are interested in doing this. So you'll have lots of people who maybe come from like an Audax background. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that is. So that's an informal kind of amateur cycling scene, which was sort of born out of France, but has spread all over now. And that is long distance cycling. So anything from 100 kilometers up to 600, 1200. There's some really large brevets, which they're called, the events. So like Paris-Brest-Paris.
PBP is the big one. Yeah, that's a very, very famous one.
Yeah, so you've got loads of people who kind of come from that background who want to come and do this. Equally, people who like enjoy riding their bike on any surface might take an interest in this as well. But then you've got people who are coming from like a mountaineering background, an ultra distance running background, someone who just loves adventure and is keen to see like the world in a different way as well. So like people's experience and their motivation like really differs. So, like some people will take part because they want to race and they want to win. Some people want to take part because they want to see how far they can push themselves to find out what they're truly capable of and where their limits lie. And other people know that they won't be able to make the time cuts, but they want to do this for themselves, for their own personal reasons. And I think that kind of like melting pot of motivations and experiences and stuff is really interesting. But the thing that we do is assess the understanding of the events of anyone who says they want to come and sign up. So the application process for all our races is like quite detailed. But for TCR, we have around like three to four applicants for every place that we offer out.
Right.
And quite heavily oversubscribed. And what we're looking for is like, do you know how to handle yourself on like difficult terrain in remote mountainous places? Do you like sufficiently plan ahead? Are you mechanically sound enough that you know how to identify a problem with the bike and then fix that? So like we're really looking to see that people have enough of a grasp of what it is that they think they want to be able to give them the opportunity to do it as well.
A common question that we get asked, I'm sure you get asked, is by people who don't do this, who are kind of baffled by this, and they like, why would people do this? Why would they do this? And you touched on that a second ago. You talked about the idea, like they want to prove themselves, they want to race, they want to win, things like that. I want to put the question to you. Why do you do it? Why do you go through the time and the effort to shepherd these people, to build these races, to bring people across? I mean, as much like adventure race directors, and you, like, none of us are getting on our private jets and flying away for the weekend. What brings you back to the sport?
So, I mean, first and foremost, the people that you meet through doing it. Really, really fortunate to have met some wonderful people through like deepening my connection with this sport. It's been really nice. And I think that for the most people, like when you speak to them, when you see them at the finish line or out on the course, they might be having a tough time, they might be having a great time, but the kind of appreciation for what it is that they're doing is like so rich and so deep that gives you a lot of kind of fuel for the fire to want to keep doing it. I think it's that's a really, really beautiful thing. I think as well, like I mentioned earlier, we sort of see ourselves as custodians of Mike's legacy, specifically for TCR and as well. So we are all really kind of driven by the unique opportunity to take something like this and continue to shape it and have fun with it, whilst also helping it stay true to its roots and hopefully set a standard for other races. And we can be on hand to support with that as well in the future, potentially, who knows. But yeah, I think like for me personally, like it's the people that I've met and like handing them that finish line beer and like seeing the massive smile of relief and that sense of adventure and the fact that they've ridden from one side of the continent to the other and seen all of these things and have all these stories to tell. I think that's such a great way of appreciating the continent that you're from and like places that are close to you and or places that are far away, because people come from all over the world to do it, really. That's really, really motivating, and it's something that like encourages me to keep going out there and racing my own bike as well, rather than just organizing events.
We're involved on this side, but also we're involved on the racing side of it too. And I agree with you 1,000% inside the adventure racing community. There's almost a spiritual experience when someone who completes a race that they thought they would never be able to do, and they pour in the time and the effort and the money and the trouble and all of that, and they go through all the training. When they cross that finish line, you absolutely, and I'm sure you've seen it too, there's an explosion of emotion that they came with, that they are far stronger than they ever thought that they could be. And then you and adventure race directors and all the volunteers, they play their role in bringing that person to that point of their life. And without, and not to be too dramatic, but without the race organizers, the volunteers, the directors, the reccees, the parkours, all that person would never have gotten from point A to point B, both literally and also metaphorically. And we get to be witnesses to that, to them being the very best version of themselves. And so, once again, it's another adventure racing, ultra cycling thing that we're seeing with each other here.
Yeah, definitely. I think like that kind of balance of like creating a route that can inspire them, and then when they complete it, that inspires you in turn as well. Like that, it really feeds itself. It's really nice.
So you've mentioned the 4 races that you put on. Without committing yourself to a 5th race, without committing yourself to anything huge, aspirationally speaking, what other areas would you want to dig into, or Are you finding that like the alumni, if you will, of the TCR are filling up races around the globe? Or is there a part of the world that's chirping at you? You'd love to give it a shot.
So we, even next year when we introduce our new race, because we're pausing the accursed for a year, we were running 4 races in a calendar year. So that'll only happen for the first time in 2027. So I think getting used to what that feels like and making sure that we have the right team around it to make those all as brilliant as they can be is step one. But like you say, I don't think any of us feel like we need to be the ones that continue to put on more and more races either. I think like seeing all of these people who've participated and been really inspired and want to go back to either where they're from or to an area they particularly love and organise an event there is a fantastic thing and a really nice way of sustaining this kind of growing movement for bikepacking and ultra racing as well. So I enjoy watching the kind of the activity that it sparks in people and the way that they want to share some of what they've experienced with other people. So hopeful that will continue and that the events that come are a good quality as well, I suppose, is the main thing I think there, because it's like it's easy to saturate something with something that isn't quite as good as it.
Yeah, you can overextend the market. The next thing you know, you kind of fall apart because people, they've got their fill of it, right? And so that's a really good lesson for race directors in any sport is there's too little and there's too much. And it's the Goldilocks effect, finding the middle.
Yeah, always focusing on the quality of what you do rather than the quantity of I think is intrinsic to sure.
Well, it's interesting because you talked about earlier, I think you said before that for every one racer, there's 3 applicants. Mm-hmm. And so you could easily fall into the trap of doubling up and expanding it and things like that. And that's one thing, you don't want to fall in there. In terms of race cost, in terms of someone coming and doing the race, what would it cost someone to come do it?
So the cost of signing up for TCR for the people who are successful is £560. So we split that into a kind of deposit payment and a balance payment that is paid later in the year as well to spread that out for folks a little bit, because obviously that is a lot of money.
£560 for a race that goes between 11 and 18 days. So on a daily rate, that's a pretty good deal when you do the math that way.
Yeah, but I suppose that the additional cost comes to each individual. So that's the cost of your to and from it, the cost of your food every day on the race, potentially accommodation at different points as well if you are bivvying. So that depending on how you choose to fuel yourself, how comfortable you are sleeping outside the time or not at all, can significantly affect the cost of that as well. But Lotto is ultimately a not-for-profit, so the way that we kind of charge for participation in our races is to meet the costs that we incur through running them. Then any small, and it is only ever very small, kind of profit any year is either given to charity or reinvested into a specific type of kind of media production, or like to better pay the media team that come and do these things as well. So like every year we seek to break even and just about do.
Talk to us a bit more about TCR 101.
Yeah, so in the first edition of the TCR, we had one woman on the start line, Juliana Buring. That number had kind of steadily grown over time. So we were around kind of 40 by TCR number 8. TCR number 10, that was kind of where it had peaked. But we felt like we could and felt like we should do better than that. So for TCR number 11, which ran this summer, we had a campaign called 100 TCR Women. And that was a specific attempt to try and boost the numbers of Flinter riders on the start line overall. And we had 112 applicants. We had just over 90 of them paid for their place, and we had, I think it was 79 who were on the start line. So we effectively doubled the largest number that we'd ever had in any previous edition, which was short of our target, but still felt like a real win because we'd increased participation so much. And what we wanted to do was to really help to build on that. So over the course of that campaign, we've been running webinars around like different skills. So whether that was like repairs in the wild or sleep strategies or just like more general kind of questions that people might have had. There was a community that we built out around. And it was obvious that there was this kind of large group of people who perhaps didn't have the confidence to take on something at the scale of TCR yet, who were definitely ultra racing curious and were interested in finding something that was slightly more accessible to give them a little bit more experience, sharpen some of their skills, a little bit more confidence, whatever it was, to then tackle something like that in the future. And that's the genesis really of where the idea for the Lost Dot 101 came from. So that'll start next year in Santiago de Compostela, which was the start of TCR this year, but we'll finish in Cordoba in Andalusia, in the south of Spain as well. So that is a 6-day race. It'll cover about 1,300 kilometers, slightly more relaxed time cutoffs than TCR, but a similar format. So parcours, control points, etc., free route between them. So it should give people a real taste of what it would be like to go and do TCR, but in a more condensed format.
Right.
Which,
yeah, what you do is you're creating a gateway activity, right? It's designed. It gives it's certainly rugged. I mean, it's so funny how you laugh how like it's only this distance, right? Not that you're saying that, but it's amazing. Most of the world, it's an amazing distance. But to your point, the organization Lost Dot's been very thoughtful about creating a pathway for people who traditionally have been marginalized and not involved in the sport to being involved in the sport, and doing it in such a way that it's not making it overly simple and it isn't performative. It's a challenging, hard race.
Yeah, it definitely is. It will still be a real challenge. And I think what's interesting and is testament to that is looking at the riders who are signing up for it as well. So you have some folks who are much more experienced and who have been at the kind of sharper end of races, who have been inspired by the prospect of just racing as part of this group of women, trans and non-binary riders, and like being a part of that. And then other people who have never taken part in a race before at all, and this will be their first kind of jump into this world. And I think that's, it's really interesting how it's appealed to that kind of broad spectrum of people. I think one that sticks in my mind is there's a woman who has volunteered on a couple of editions of TCR in the past and had been like really interested to get closer to the ultra world, and was looking at it, but had a family at home and a kind of busy life, and then started doing more audaxing as well, and is now going to come and do the 101 as their first race. And I think like that's a beautiful thing, and like I hope that we'll see more kind of stories like that kind of emerging. More of the riders who were there on the start line as well.
They were like edging closer to it, right? Little by little, they're getting closer and closer until eventually they fell in, and now they're racing. That's great stuff. You've been very kind with your time. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Can you share with us the race and the dates that are being held this year, and where folks could go to learn more about?
So the first race on the calendar next year is the Lost Dot 101. So that's the race that we've just been speaking about for women, trans and non-binary riders. That'll start on the 10th of May in Santiago de Compostela. It's a 6-day race, and it's going to finish in Cordoba in Andalusia. TCR number 12 will start on the 19th of July next year in Trondheim. So that's a 19-day race, and it will finish in Kalamata in the south of Greece, going via controls in Slovakia, Bosnia and Albania on the way as well. And then the Trans-Pyrenees race will start on the 25th of September. I can't tell you where that's going to start because we haven't officially released the route yet. That'll be coming out in early January, but that's going to be an 8-day race. That is a road race, but with some incentivized off-road sections, and will be a double traverse of the Pyrenees again. Of that.
And we're taking a break this year for the Accursed.
Yes, the Accursed is taking 1 year off, but the team will be heading back out to the Balkans to basically ride the entire route, which we have designed so we can fine tune it and make sure that it's absolutely perfect for when we launch it for 2027. All of the information about all of our races is on our website, which is lostdot.cc. We post regular updates on there. And then we also have our social media channels on Facebook and Instagram where we share regular updates as well.
David, is there anything I didn't ask you about the race that you want to tell me?
Nothing's immediately springing to mind now. I feel like that's been a really nice conversation and a good rundown.
Well, that is the best comment you can give a podcast, or you run out of words. I appreciate it. David Ayre of Lost Dot, thanks for being on the Dark Zone, and good luck and have a great racing season.
Cheers, Brian. Thanks so much.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you to Dave for coming on to the show. Thanks for him giving us his time and his understanding and his love of ultra cycling. A great intro for all of you out there kicking that around. I know I have something on my schedule that I'm looking at down the road. I would love to give it a shot. The original title for this episode was Adventure Racing's Cousin, and we left that alone because it was kind of obscure who would get it when they saw that, but definitely Lost Dot Racing and ultra cycling racing and all the stuff going on around the world is definitely in the same family as what we do. And we are delighted here at the Dark Zone to bring it to you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. You keep racing. We're going to keep talking.